Hello and welcome. I'm Dr. Katherine Horton, and this is now the continuation of the broadcast after the hack. Let me make doubly sure that you guys can hear me. Hello and welcome. Okay, that sounds good. I already expected that they would be hacking my voice transmission again, like they usually do. Okay, so I'm very sorry about this. The previous broadcast was hacked quite violently, as you could see. I was knocked off, and I seem to have lost, hundreds of viewers in the process. I hope people can actually make it across to the new broadcast. I hope people join me later. Now, the previous broadcast, what I was talking about when the hack hit, it was a sequence of things. Number one, the importance of legal dictionaries. Number two, I said that the entire American legal system is under massive fraud with admiralty law ruling, and you can see that, for example, when there's cartel signaling jeering in our faces, when in Florida there's a courthouse in the shape of a ship, right? And also in the flag. So in US courtrooms, you have the American flag with a gold rim, which apparently is representing the fact that it's not really a normal court, but actually is operating under admiralty law. And in that case, everybody in America is considered to have been lost at sea and stuff like that. And, consequently loses most of their human rights, or, what you would attribute to humans. It's a bit more complex than that, but at the end of the day, what it's about is to screw people over. Now, that was one thing I talked about that might have pissed off the cartel, but I was also talking about the UK and how ridiculous it is to have over 60 million people governed by only, up to 15 Supreme Court judges. And I've also mentioned the fact that one of the Supreme Court judges, who I think recently retired, also stalked me personally. And I suspect that I was his control file, because shortly after starting this entire thing, he was promoted to the Supreme Court, leapfrogging everybody else in the judiciary. Now, that is a true fact, and that is something that I will also testify about in court. And I consider, what happened to me to be part of that control file. But anyway, so this is the case. So with 15 people in the UK and, a similar number in America, it is very easy to blackmail judges, to threaten judges, to buy judges. So this is not how our society should operate. And the alternative is the common law, where you can be tried by, a group of your peers. And both of them have disadvantages and advantages. But what is pretty clear is that the judiciary, as it stands, has hopelessly veered out of control. With the judiciary, quite happily signing off on the asset stripping of, for example, the UK people and the bank charges case, and many other things that I've seen. There was also, I remember, a lawsuit by the survivors of the Iraqi genocide, known as the, Iraq War, which was an entirely illegal war by the Crown Corporation that resulted in 1 million people dying. When the survivors of that genocide brought a court case in the UK, I think in the end it was bounced off by the Supreme Court as having been out of time. But that is pretty ludicrous, given that for crimes against humanity, which is what this one was, there is no limitation period. So there was all these, shocking things that I've seen from the UK judiciary that has, pretty much shaken my belief and their ability to do anything. Nevertheless, I have to go back to that court to stop the targeting, because they have a direct enforcement arm on the military, which is what we need if you want to survive this. So this is why I'm running this two-tiered track. So I am going into the normal judiciary, but I'm also bracing myself for the most ludicrous criminality, quite frankly. And, if anything sensible comes out of that joint, it would be, frankly, a little miracle and a massive surprise to me as well. But nevertheless, we have to try it, and we have to force our systems to work in our interest. So this is what I'm working on. So this was the stage at which the previous broadcast was hacked, and I just couldn't use my computer anymore. And I'm very sorry about that, but that previous video shall be standing for, as you know, as lasting evidence for the integrated weapon system, especially cyber weapon system, that is analyzing what we're saying, that is analyzing content. I'm pretty sure but that by now it's triggered by AI, although in my case there might still be agents, you know, at the control and listening to me. And you know, your broadcast is sabotaged by the most ludicrous and unusual of hacks if you are talking about things that they don't want. But of course, they can try as much as they want to with their, I don't know, you know, their hyper game theory, you know, super duper game theory bullcrap. But at the end of the day, what it's really about is getting the information across to you, and I will succeed no matter what. So even the viewers who I've lost on the previous broadcast will rejoin this eventually, will watch it later, and then we will have moved forward having actually real life evidence that, by the way, you can also download my YouTube video, the previous one that was hacked, and include it in your quote bundle as evidence of hacking directly related to what was said. Because the entire, you know, year and a half of the Techno Crime Fighters Forum pretty much documented the same thing, that these sort of, you know, hiccups in the broadcast were not random. They were very, very content dependent. Okay. Always. They always were. And certain people, for example, if you remember Dr. Melissa Back, she was being hacked all the time to the extent that she couldn't get her message out. And that was because she is the, you know, personal mutilation slave of an Air Force veteran. And I think there are massive Air Force contracts out on her. That's my view. And this is why she was being hacked so badly. So this is the reality. But now let's dive back into the news, because there are good news and there are bad news. But what I would like to start off with, which is what I failed to show you last time, and that's when the hiccup started, I would like to give you some information that is relevant to you, especially if you've got voice to skull. Now, if you're going into a court of law and you want to explain to a judge voice to skull, you can pick them up where they are now, which is probably not knowing anything about this military technology, and gradually guide them on. For example, you can point them to the invisible secret spy Nano wireless earphone, Earpiece for mobile phone, which you can buy off Amazon.com for $14. Okay, $14. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is the little microphone that goes into your ear. This is how small it is. It is tiny. And when it's placed inside the ear, you push it in and there's a little slope downwards towards your eardrum. And when you put it in there, this thing can't really fall out unless you stand on your head or shake your head about violently. And then you can hear things perfectly. So once a judge has understood that this device is already invisible from the outside, right, and only costs $14, it's not too big a stretch of the imagination to imagine a military technology that's militarized, much smaller, and probably also much more expensive. But, you know, either way, this already would do for voice to skull if you could push the microphone into the tissue somehow and lodge it there, and the person wouldn't know that, he was implanted at night with this thing. Now, what I want to point you to is this one here. This is the organic cell phone secretly implanted in my ear. There's YouTube links. And this is the research of someone who has spent $30,000 investigating and talked to a lot of people, companies, so people at companies specializing in nanotechnology. But I just would like to show you what this person has uncovered here. And so this was reported in 2016, and I should have actually had this link present a long time ago, but it got lost in the, the useful stuff always gets lost. But the point is that this person used an endoscope that can be bought off Amazon, which it's like a little camera you can push down your ear canal, and then you can have a look at your ear. And what this person discovered was nano devices, okay? These things are not hairs, they're actually cables and devices emitting sound, okay? And then if I scroll down, she also found things like crystals, okay? And here it's written crystals which are hard as bone, very difficult to take out, okay? And crystals can pick up vibrations, can pick up many things, right? But if you think about this crystal lodged in the ear, right, as the pickup unit, right? And then there's also nanotubes and nanofibers that were visible. Well, you can already tell the judge that once you go from here to the military version, this thing would be replaced by a crystal, okay? And this crystal can literally be lodged in your ear and, you know, stick onto the tissue. And the sticking on can be done, for example, with nanotechnology and nano barbs and nano wires and nano things that grow into the tissue, okay? So everybody who has voice to skull probably has a device like that, okay? And these are, I think, these are nano diamonds or something like that. Okay, so anyway, please read this. The link will be included in the description after the broadcast. But this is the sort of stuff that you can include in your court case to get it across to a judge what is being done to you. Okay. And the other thing that you should also always stress, which is a point that comes from simple physics that a lot of doctors shockingly seem to be absolutely unaware of or incapable of, and 100% of the psychiatrists, the simple point from physics is that you cannot possibly have a disease or illness of any type, like a chemical balance or bacterium or virus, generating perfect English grammar in your head, okay? There is no chemical process or biological, you know, agent or pathogen that could possibly infect you and then in your tissue and in your, you know, biomass generate perfect grammar. And most importantly, it is physically impossible for virus or disease to create perfect English grammar if you happen to be in England, and perfect Spanish grammar if you happen to be in Spain or Latin America, right? And then within that, also perfectly generate your mother tongue if you're in that country but actually speak another language, okay? Now, there's always this thing that people say, oh yeah, it's the brain, and then it can just go like, whoa, and you can have hallucinations. No, that's what I'm saying. You can't have that sort of stuff, not in the way that it's being pulled off. You can have it temporarily with drugs, triggering some of the existing, memories maybe. But even there, I would be very, very curious if those people having bad trips maybe also have eye implants, you know, because all the drugs on the planet are being sold by the intelligence agencies who also have been implanting people since the 1960s and 50s. So, you know, I would be very, very curious to check people who took some drugs and had some horrific bad trips if they don't actually were not just watching some, you know, fucking virtual reality movie, right? So that sort of stuff is also to be considered. But when we're talking about things like hearing voices as a sign of schizophrenia, no, it frickin' isn't. Hearing voices is a sign that some dickhead is speaking to a microscopic intercom in your ear, okay? It is physically impossible to have some sort of illness, which I remind you has to be either pathogen, right, like a bacterium or virus, or it has to be a genetic disorder, something going wrong in the wiring or going wrong in the machinery, right, and biological stuff. And it is physically impossible to have that aligned so perfectly that the illness creates perfect voices and then also perfect grammar. Okay, and that goes back to, for those of you who have done physics, to the second law of thermodynamics. Okay, but when you have something going wrong because of entropy and all that, right, you will typically end up with noise, which is why if your radio is broken, you don't suddenly have perfect angelic voices saying something else. No, you end up with the, you know, the typical, hissing sound that we all know from radios. That is noise. Okay, so schizophrenia could, or hearing voices could be an illness, like a mental illness, a brain illness, or something like that, what we would expect is on the way to hearing perfect voices, there should be a lot of people hearing the same volume, but noise or honking sounds or something, but we don't. We just have perfect voices. So that is clearly a military technology. And all these people who have ever heard voices were being fucked around by a bunch of dickheads. That's what it means, okay? And I wish psychiatrists and doctors would get some basic education in maths and physics and systems analysis to be able to figure this out. But anyway, so this is very important. But now on to real news, okay? So let's pick up speed because I've got quite a lot to go through. Talking about technology, there was also on the 20th of June a news article on the BBC, and I can see that the movie is, the broadcast is hanging again, but let's just continue. So on the 20th of June 2019, there was a BBC article about the fake French minister in a silicone mask who stole millions. And it was about an imposter who was imitating the French minister here, okay? But that aside, this is just a quirky little story. What's really important is actually what's further down in this report, which is this, okay? And this little inlay here of a video is talking about software technology that allows you to make fake movies, whereby it looks like some famous person is saying things that they actually are not saying at all, okay? So when you watch this footage here, and I hope I'm not infringing on copyright.
It got me thinking about my full-time employees and their ability to survive on $8 an hour in New York City. And foremost in all of our minds has been the loss and the grief felt by the people of Orlando. Most of us don't get our health care through the marketplace. We get it through our job, or through Medicare or Medicare. And what you should know is that thanks to the Affordable Care Act, your coverage is better today than it was before. Women.
Okay, and what is so interesting is when the fake footage started, so the first footage was real. This was Obama talking here. Apparently this is real footage, but then again, who could tell? They just tell us. But then listen carefully of what Obama says when it's the fake footage, because there's cartel signaling in that as well.
An hour in New York City. And foremost in all of our minds has been the loss and the grief felt by the people of Orlando.
So, the people of Orlando, right? I mean, remember the false flags and all that, right? So anyway, what I want to draw your attention to is something that for me, this wasn't a surprise at all, okay? I mean, I could have told you that the NSA has this technology and had it back in the 1990s or much earlier, right? So this is not a no-brainer to pull off. But now it's official. So now there has been an announcement of this, and this is what is important. So in other words, BBC, which is otherwise known as MI7, okay, is now announcing in June that there's this software where you can fake footage. Okay. So, I would just say, given what we know about MI7 and what we know about, false flags, just watch for fake footage just cropping up left, right, and center, in important respects. Okay, so much about technology. Here is a bit of real footage, okay, that is being loaded right now. And this is a report from Tele M1 in Switzerland. Unfortunately, this is in German, but for those of you who speak German, this is the report about Andres Zaugg. This was the inventor who set a fire to the St. Ursan cathedral's altar, I think, which was in protest about basically the suppression of the people of Switzerland by the Vatican crime cartel. Okay, but then what happened is that he was locked up for 5 years, most of which he spent in solitary confinement, which the UN already declared to be torture. So he was tortured for years. And then the authorities refused to let him go, the prison that is, okay? And in the end, he had to go to the highest court to fight for his release. And then the highest court says, yes, he has to be released. And the prison still refused, using the CASP. So the CASP is the Adult and Child Protection Services, which appears to be a new Nazi, installation here in Switzerland, which is pretty much Nazi style, inventing some sort of mental diagnoses that they seem to have pulled out of their rear sides, and then is, using that to put through whatever fucking torture the criminal crime cartel here in Switzerland wants to pull off. Okay, now there are two things interesting about this video. Number one, in one section you can see me interview Andres Zaugg, so you can see the back of my head, which typically you don't get to see. But then the other thing that's important about this court case is that in 2013 there was a common law jury decision, a judgment, that the Vatican and the Catholic Church is a transnational criminal organization. And with that, they lost their right to their property. But when Andre set light to this, I think it was back at the end of the 2000s, so 2008 or 2009 or something like that. So it was before the judgment, but then again, the Catholic Church was a transnational criminal organization already 1,000 years ago, right? So most certainly all throughout the 21st century. Now, the interesting question is, should it turn out that actually that was a criminal organization, they did not have any right to property. So, Swiss people setting light to their property, if it's a criminal organization, is not that big a deal, actually, right? In fact, fighting these bastards can be considered to be the duty of every Swiss. Okay? So that is what's very interesting. But I just want you to have this link so that you can see that this court case actually is for real and that I really was there, as I said. Now, this is Switzerland. Now onwards to Germany. News from Germany. And this is an item of news that I think a lot of people have been wondering about. And it is about Angela Merkel's shaking attacks. Okay. Now, my current understanding is that there were 3 shaking attacks. Okay. The first one was in the Ukraine. The second one is this one. And the third one was when she was standing next to the Finnish prime minister. Now, let's just have a look at these clips and let's think about what might be behind this. So this is now the second time she experienced shaking. I show you this one first because here the shaking is very clear. You can see Angela Merkel frontally. So, somebody else is speaking. She is not speaking. She just has to stand there in silence. And look what happens. I hope you can see. So you can see that her legs are shaking, her hands are shaking. She seems to be disconcerted. Somebody passes her a glass of water, but she says, no, thank you. Then she hugs her arms and you can see her legs shaking. But look how the shaking is very strong in the legs and not so strong in the hands, right? So she's trying to stabilize her arms, but the shaking is most violent in the legs. Okay? So keep that in mind, right? Okay, so this was one clip, okay? Now, I'm going somewhere with this, guys, okay? Now, let's look at the third time she's shaking.
Take a look at these meetings of world leaders from the past 10 years, and you'll likely notice one thing. This is German Chancellor Angela Merkel, one of the most influential leaders of Europe. Her leadership spans 13 years and 4 terms.
Sorry.
Ich schwöre, dass ich meine Kraft dem Wohle des deutschen Volkes
I am
widmen,
sorry,
so wahr
I'm
mir
sorry.
Gott.
Another video started playing in the background, okay? Forgive me, guys. Sorry, I didn't notice it started playing. So here, there was no sound apart from the music playing, okay? But now watch carefully again. Okay, so again, look how the hands are not shaking as violently as the legs, okay? But they are all shaking, right? But there's not much tremor in the hands itself, but there's a lot of tremor in the legs, and there seems to be tremor all the way up to the shoulders, okay? So keep that in mind. The other thing to note is that here the German anthem plays. So she has to stand there while the German anthem, you know, is being played. And also note that she's saying something, and it's unclear if she says that to the Finnish, you know, Prime Minister, or if she says that to herself, or if she says that to somebody who is, you know, maybe listening to her through some intercom. And then look carefully, she seems to be saying the same stuff. I hope people who are experts in lip reading could figure out what she's saying, but to me it looks like she's repeating the same thing. Okay, now look at him. He looks straight at the camera. Look at the facial expression. Okay. And look how at this point where you have the drum crescendo, she is shaking violently. Okay. And now watch her. Shaking comes down a bit. Not as violent. She seems to be very angry. Now she's being shaken a bit more again. Here. Almost down. And now, when she's walking, she's perfectly under control. Look at that. Can you see that? I don't see any frailty, any instability. She switched back to perfectly fine. Okay, and so on and so on. So I hope you noticed this. Now, I on purpose showed you everything out of order because you could study it a lot better in these two videos. Now comes the total clincher. Okay, and this is the first time this happened. And note a few things. When it started, this was the very first time it was recorded, okay, close by camera, which you probably have at these occasions, but this one really seems to be very close, right? And here you can see the profile of him as well, and then you can see her shake, you know, behind him. And now note that it's again the German anthem playing. You can see her hands shake there. Oops, sorry, it's on it. You can see her bite her lips. So this is, you know, trying to get it under control. And did you notice how the shaking went with the crescendo? And there was a violent increase. right? Now watch what happens next. And did you see? She turns and she's back to normal. Look. Did you see that? Back to normal. Now, let's watch this again because this is the absolute clincher. So before I continue, I would like to make a couple of points. I mean, you can probably guess what I'm going to say, right? Can't you? What I'm going to say is that what has been put out by the mainstream media with you know, with their usual loud barking ferocity is that, oh, you know, she must be frail, there must be some illness, but an illness is not so well timed. Again, just like you can't have an illness produce perfect sound in somebody's head, you can't have an illness react to a drum crescendo, right? That's not really how it works, and that's what we've seen twice. Right? When you look carefully at the vibrations and you try to assess it, the vibrations seem to be becoming much more violently as the music increases. Now, you can probably guess what I'm going to say, right? It is not an illness. She's being attacked. The question is how, right? And there are two ways to attack somebody. Number one is with directed energy weapons, right? You can vibrate somebody. You can attack somebody with very, very intense sound vibrations. Maybe if you can most certainly attack them very intensely with energy weapons. I've showed you that you can have energy being imparted onto a whiteboard, like it was done with me, to dent it. Now, if you change the waveform, you can really batter somebody's back and make them vibrate, right? I was attacked like that by a helicopter, and it really felt like being assaulted, but you know, it felt as if I was underwater in a swimming pool, and you're very close to those high pressure jets, and you can feel the jet pumping out the water. Now, there was a glass roof between me and the helicopter, and I was gunned by a directed energy weapon. But what I felt, you know, go across my face and my chest and my legs was exactly the sort of shockwave from the directed energy weapon. So it can be a directed energy weapon, and then it can also be something else, which is chip implants. Okay, being the most powerful woman, or supposedly, right, in Europe, as one of these news commentators said, you can be sure that, you know, these all-male clubs like the Jesuits and the Freemasons and like Intel and like the military, right, they would absolutely get off on chipping you to the hilt. Right? And they don't have any sort of qualms. And in fact, the higher you are, the more of a kind of, you know, the more they would get off on torturing you. So it could also be chip implants, right? Now, with both, right, with the chip implants, it's obvious why only she would be affected. A chip implant can be somewhere along the spine, right? And it would produce exactly the sort of thing. But I don't know, I'm not exactly an expert on where the chip would have to be to create this sort of effect. I'm pretty sure you could do it, because as soon as you start affecting the nervous system, you can do this very easily with just a simple oscillatory current being passed by the chip. This is how I would, you know, imagine how to do it really, really simply. You only just need a bit of nanotech or some sort of, you know, wiring up to the nervous system to pass it into the nervous system, and then you can do just that. Now, this is being done to me and also many, many other victims. The standard thing, and this is also what I'm experiencing, is that I would be vibrated at night. So Intel would go through a sequence of machine gunning everything around me loudly, then machine gunning me. And when they got bored, they would start vibrating me. And then they would combine the vibrating me with machine gunning me. And, you know, they only have so many things they can do, and they just go through as they are jacking off. So, you know, both can be done. Right now, the crucial thing is that if it's a beam, as soon as you step out of the beam, you would be fine. So based on what I've seen, I would almost say that she has some sort of beam pointed at her, you know, and it is very easy to have the beam somewhere, you know, from above or maybe even from satellite pointed at somebody and only hit that person, but not the person standing next to her. Okay. So what I've seen and all these like little hints are already enough for me to say that there's absolutely nothing wrong with Angela Merkel. She is being attacked. Now, it doesn't surprise me because, you know, the organized crime cartel, otherwise known as the intelligence agencies, and the military, they are going nuts with these directed energy weapons. And just like little boys playing with their dick for the first time, they just can't stop it. So they will just go ever more nuts unless, you know, somebody walks in on them and makes them stop. So this is the best analogy I actually have for these guys. Sorry. But, you know, this is what it is. Now, these guys get especially off on torturing women, right? And I know people have been trying to say to me that, you know, actually it's not 70% female victims in intel targeting, it's actually 50-50. But one of the things I can say is that unless we're talking about top whistleblowers, on average, women and children are absolutely slaughtered compared to guys, okay? Why would that be? Well, it's because these guys get sexually off on it. And it is known from every single war that when you look at the war crimes, women and children get hit the hardest and they get absolutely slaughtered in the most sadistic way. This is well known from every war that has ever raged on our planet. And this is also what is the case here with the intelligence agency crimes and the military crimes, exactly the same thing. So what this indicates to me is that there are some, you know, perverted men with access to directed energy weapons jacking one off. And the question is, what for, right? Why attack Angela Merkel? Now, there has been a lot of uproar within Europe, and it's, I think, pretty well known by everybody by now that Angela Merkel is part of the, you know, globalist entire machinery. Okay, I mean, she is doing the triangle symbol with her hand, you know, the Merkel router, which actually looks like a downward triangle, right? But even if it were diamonds, that is the triangle up and the triangle down in one big, it's all just the same triangle shit. But anyway, so doing that in the most obvious way, right? That's a dead giveaway, but also about how the whole German state is being now completely demolished through immigration. And it's not just, oh, I hate immigrants. What everybody in Germany has pointed out is that it's not just families, it's not normal immigration, it's not families coming, not women and children fleeing something. It is young men of military age who are being brought in by the millions. And at the same time, we've got the genocide plans, which state that the over 80 million Germans are to be taken down to 25 million within the next 6 years. So young men who are around the world known to be the most enlightened and wisest of all, you know, people of all ages, right? If you paid them a lot of money, and especially if they are not the same ethnicity as the people who are killing, or they would be killing, say, right? Then it's very easy to make people do that, okay? So there's many things that indicate that this is exactly what's happening. So Germany had imported millions of young men of military age, right? And in complete disregard to the German population, which is gradually getting ever more impoverished, right? And the question is, what is all this for? Right? Now, this was all Angela Merkel's doing. There are also other conspiracy theories, which maybe, again, as always, turn out to be conspiracy fact, right? That Angela Merkel might be related to previous, you know, leaders of Germany who have been working very closely with the organized crime cartel. But that I don't have enough evidence to present it here, but keep it in mind that stuff like that could happen as well. Now, should we condone that the white hats are, you know, assaulting Angela Merkel with directed energy weapons? I don't think so, right? But either way, if we get the analysis right, we can read a lot of stuff into this. Okay, now this entire theory of, oh, it's white hats attacking Angela Merkel, you know, to set a sign, and they're using directed energy weapons to really drill it home, you know, this theory or hypothesis is also not quite right, and I can show you exactly why. Okay, so let me share my screen and let me take you back to the very first. Hang on. I also have to bring up something. there's one photograph that I wanted to show you that will become important. Hang on. Yeah, okay, I've got it. So let me share my screen and let me take you there to the third. Let's analyze the third incident of shaking, because there's something else that you can read out. And this time it's not from Angela Merkel. Okay, so here's the third shake incident. And this was while she was standing next to the Ukrainian president. And now in all this, when the shaking starts, I ask you to first of all note that the shaking starts with the playing of the German anthem, and then watch the face of the Ukrainian president. Okay, and this RT video is perfect because it's focusing on the Ukrainian president and not so much on Angela Merkel. Watch. Boom! Did you see this? Watch his face again. Did you see it? There was a big fat smile on his face. And look how he's stretching his muscles down to look serious. And now she starts, oh, that was again, he's laughing. He's like, oh my God, I mustn't laugh, I mustn't laugh. Think of something sad, think of something sad. Yes, he's thinking something sad, but it doesn't really work. He really, look how he's frowning because he wants to burst out laughing. Then he's trying again, but it doesn't work. So, can you see this? And most crucially, he starts to grin before he would have had time to be aware and figure out what's actually going on. In other words, this guy is 100% involved. And his micro expressions say it right here. Now let's watch it again. Oh, sorry. Right, let's watch it again. Look carefully how Angela Merkel starts shaking when the anthem starts playing, but her shaking only becomes obvious with time, right? And this guy would have never had any time to figure out that she was even shaking if he hadn't known ahead of time that this would happen. Look at that. And look at how he's stretching his muscles down by force. Did you see that? Let's watch it again, because this, ladies and gentlemen, is evidence of a crime. There you can see him smiling, and moments later you can see him stretch his muscles downward because he's desperately trying to pull the corners of his mouth down by force to make a sad face, which he doesn't manage because this guy is a clown and he's about to piss himself laughing, right? Now let's watch this again. Smile. She's not even shaking. He's like, oh, I have to keep this in. Pull corners of the mouth down. Hold it. Oh, you've blown it there. Oh my God. Pull them down again. Frown. Hold it. Pull it down. Let's see, how long does he last? Oh my God. It broke. Can you see it now? And now he's trying to turn his smirk into a frown. And now he's pulling it down. And what's so funny is you can see that he tilts his head forward because he's trying so hard to pull the corners of his mouth down that he even pulls down his entire head, right? So this guy has just given away that this was a planned attack that he was fully aware of. Okay? Now, the question is, why would he do such a thing, and who the fuck is he really? Right? Now, if you remember, there was a coup by the CIA, right? And we all remember Victoria Nuland talking about, you know, how they're putting people in place, and his most embarrassing leak, right? Where she, frankly, in my view, sounded like a totally ditzy bitch. But anyway, that aside, there was a coup, a CIA or US organized coup. By the way, keep in mind that it's never the US, it's really the Crown Corporation. And then he was put in as a puppet, okay? Now, if he were a puppet by the Crown Corporation, he would also have to have a control file that would have to be satanic. So do we have any evidence of this motherfucker being a satanic little asshole? Yes, we do. Right? Yes, we do. And here it says a comedian is elected as president. Yeah, this guy's a fucking comedian. And there you can see him do the satanic signaling, right? Smirking. And it's this smirk with the corners of the mouth going up that he is so desperate to suppress. But this guy is more in the smirking business and less in the controlling your micro expressions business, which is why he does such a piss poor job at this, right? But this video alone is enough for me to say that this was a targeted attack on Angela Merkel, and this motherfucker was in on it, right? He knew, which is why he couldn't, you know, control himself. Because somebody who wouldn't know what was going to come would at first show surprise, would at first look over to Angela Merkel to check if everything was okay. Remember that, you know, if things are the way they should be, right? If these guys were not insiders of it, if he were not an insider, there would always be a little tingling fear of being assassinated when you stand in the middle of a square with so many people around, okay? So when somebody starts shaking next to you, the instinctive thing is to check, oh shit, is she okay? Because whatever just hit her might hit me, right? But he doesn't. He's smirking straight away. Now that is not matching up with anything apart from the one hypothesis, which says that he's a criminal, part of a big, fat, satanic criminal network, okay? And that's what's happening. Now you can go back and you can say, okay, this was the first instance. When was the second shake? The second shake, oops, sorry, was this previous video here. Okay, this was Merkel shakes again, right? This guy, I haven't actually watched it in detail, but I don't remember seeing anything quite so overt with him, right? But what you can tell is that Angela Merkel was attacked in Ukraine. She was attacked, this seems to be back in Germany, right? It's an official ceremony, right? And then she was also attacked talking to the, where the hell was this? I didn't even look it up. Okay, so, oh yes, this is also in Berlin. So she received the Finnish Prime Minister in Berlin. So this was in Berlin, okay? So Angela Merkel, sorry, was vibrated on Ukrainian territory, which is under control of the CIA, aka the Crown Corporation, run from Britain and from Switzerland and from the Vatican, okay? And then she was also attacked on German soil. Now, what that means, and this seems to be a pretty much controlled condition here, controlled environment, right? I mean, with these buildings around, if the frickin' BND can't control this little patch of land, they would really be out of a job, okay? So here it means that this is also a CIA-controlled area, wherever the hell she is. Now, it could be CIA-controlled or rather Crown Corporation-controlled because there are satellites above that have just gunned her, which is possible, or she was just gunned from one of the surrounding, you know, buildings. Either way, right? What it means is that whatever is controlling Ukraine with directed energy weapons is controlling Germany with directed energy weapons. Okay? This is very, very important to know. And this, you have real life evidence of this right here, as long as you have a brain to actually figure this out. Okay? Now, we have already known for a very long time, and I've been saying that for a very long time, that Germany is actually a crown colony, okay, and it has been since the Second World War. So it is not surprising to see this, played out in practice, right? So the Crown Corporation controls Ukraine, and the Crown Corporation controls Germany, and it also controls the US, right? So anyway, this is what it is. So far, I tend, it could be a chip implant, but it could also just be a simple directed energy weapon beam, So either way, whichever of the two it is, right? That's what's being done to her. Okay, so anyway, this is from Germany. Now let's move on, because there have been interesting news from around the world. Okay, now in the US, I would like to point you. I'm going to point out people, who you should follow. Because they have very important information. So there has been a new interview, 23rd of June, on Greg Hunter's USA Watchdog, which I can wholeheartedly recommend. And this interview was with Kevin Shipp. Okay, so it says the global espionage attack on Trump is the worst in history. Okay, so very important to listen to that view, and try to figure out what's happening with Trump. Is he with the cartel? Is he against the cartel? And by the way, that's exactly what you should be doing with Angela Merkel when you see her, right, being vibrated with probably directed energy weapons, and the Ukrainian president is smirking. Okay, does it mean that the Ukrainian president is higher up in the crime cartel, that maybe Angela Merkel with her cartel signaling, triangle is? Well, it seems to be the case, right? And even that is not that surprising, because I remind people that the Jesuits and the Masons and also the Vatican crime cartel are a men-only club. So if there are any women left, you haven't reached the top of the pyramid. And that applies to Angela Merkel, it applies to the Queen of Belgium, and it applies to the Queen of England. Whatever the hell these ladies might be thinking, they are not at the top of the cartel simply because they are women. Okay? So unless you have Y chromosomes, you will not be at the top of the cartel. That's just how it is. Okay? So Sonny Boy here has more of a chance, frankly, sleeping his way up in the cartel than Angela Merkel has. That's just how it is. And I'm not saying that to denigrate Angela Merkel. This is just how it is in the cartel. At the very top, just like the Waffen-SS and the Gestapo were full of homosexuals, that is also the case with this crime cartel. It is always the case in militaristic high pyramid organizations, because at the very top it gets so psychopathic that only those men who can strongly bond with other men, open brackets sexually, will last. Okay? And that is just a selection, what's it called? Like an artifact of the selection, a selection bias of the system. Okay? But in all this, you have to figure out, is Angela Merkel now in or out of the cartel? Is Trump now in or out of the cartel? And keep an eye on this, okay? Because these things are very, very important. I remind everybody that my take is that the cartel wants to asset strip the entire European royalty, and they want to asset strip the American billionaires. Now, those American billionaires who can figure this one out will start migrating out of the cartel. So it's very possible that that's what Trump is doing. But it could also be that it's just a Masonic double bluff, and these billionaires haven't figured it out, and they are going down with us all, who knows. But please keep an eye on this, educate yourself. Now, talking about Kevin Shipp, the other thing I would like to draw your attention to is an interview that Dave Janda did with, yes, I got his name right. Sorry, I was confused for a moment, with Bill Binney and Kirk Wiebe. And what is interesting is that there has been recently some sort of, I don't really want to call it a spat. It's more like a, difference of opinion, and maybe with some misunderstandings thrown in. And it's about a guy called Dennis Montgomery, who blew the whistle on a parallel platform called The Hammer, which was collecting, it was doing mass surveillance and, you know, some sort of dodgy surveillance in parallel to the NSA. Now, you know, in all this, what is in question is Dennis Montgomery a genuine whistleblower, or is he not? Is the hammer real, or is it not? And so on. And this is what this entire argument is about. And as I understand, Kevin Shipp is saying, oh, Dennis Montgomery is probably just a big bag. You know, I probably can't do him justice what he's actually saying, because I didn't have time to read about these nuances. But, you know, he's saying, well, this guy's not that reliable. And Bill Binney and Kirk Wiebe analyzed what this guy said and thought that that was reliable. At least they didn't have any evidence to think otherwise, and thought that it is at least worth investigating. Okay. Now, I don't really want to focus on this difference of opinion, because I think that will be just ironed out. But what I really want to focus on are the finer details that raise the alarm for me, which is that, you know, several hard drives of data were given to the FBI, right, by Dennis Montgomery. But when this data was taken, and by the way, you know, as always, you know, disappeared into the bowels of the FBI, never really to be used again, right? What happened is that at that time, Dennis Montgomery had suffered a stroke, right? And for this reason, he couldn't even sign the forms for handing over the data himself. Now, for me, that is the key, okay? That is the key, because suffering a stroke at such a critical time, it is so unlikely that, again, it points towards directed energy weapons. Now, as soon as you have the use of directed energy weapons involved, you know, they don't typically attack somebody quite so violently if this person wouldn't have anything to say. So for me, that is further evidence that this guy, Dennis Montgomery, was genuinely blowing the whistle on something genuine. And frankly, for me, the most important piece of evidence is a stroke. Okay? And then, do parallel platforms exist? Well, hell yes, because it's a free-for-all. And actually, there's an interview where Bill Binney is saying that the mass surveillance equipment, okay, get this, guys, the mass surveillance equipment used by NSA to tap optical fiber lines where all our traffic is going is available commercially. So anybody with sufficient amount of money can do mass surveillance on a nation. Isn't that nice? Right? So the fact that actually a mechanism for human trafficking, and this is another thing I want to get into people's heads, it is not mass surveillance, it is not data theft, it is human trafficking, what this is about. Okay? This data is being used to traffic those people into business plans, into miscellaneous business plans of brain research, of political goals, of business goals, for sex trafficking. And basically, in the cartel, every single person is not even considered to be a person. It's considered to be a big lump of biomass. And what the cartel is trying to do is maximize the profit on that biomass. So there will not just be one business plan executed with that, but 1 million, as many as you can, you know, stuff down the pipe. Okay? So when you have mass surveillance equipment being sold commercially, what you have is you have human trafficking equipment sold commercially. And that's how it should be considered. Okay? And it is the human trafficking of the most vulnerable people in society and of the richest people in society. So with this equipment out in the market, right, if you are a business owner, an entrepreneur, well, you can, you know, guess where your industrial espionage is going to come from. Not yours, that of your competitors. Okay? So this is a horrific thing, and it actually should be the job of people like Andrew Parker at MI5 and, you know, Dr. Bruno Kahl at BND and these sort of jerks to sort this out and have this stuff taken off the market. Unfortunately, they seem to be working for an organized crime cartel, right? So the last thing that they will do is fight terrorism and fight human trafficking, right? So this is why here I am, and I'm pointing out these things, but really it should be the job of these people, which is a job that they are not doing, which we have to ensure will cost them dearly in court. Okay, so this is what you should really take away from the entire Dennis Montgomery story. Okay, the Intel whistleblowers are still clarifying the details, right? I mean, they are basically finalizing their intelligence report, if you want to, and that's fine, right? But the very important things for me personally are the fact that Dennis Montgomery seemed to have been attacked with a shot to the head or gunning to the head by a direct energy weapon, which led to a stroke. And there are other people, well-known people who are very public about having been attacked with directed energy weapons, which led to stroke-like symptoms. One of them, you know, an example that many of you might know is Carrie Cassidy. In my first interview with her, she actually said that on the show, right? That she was attacked with a directed energy weapon like that. Karen Hudis, former general counsel of the World Bank, is very public about that as well, right? So there are many, many people more who I could name, right, who are public about this. And what we have is we have rampant terrorism with directed energy weapons. And it would have been, again, the job of people like Andrew Parker and Alex Younger and Dr. Bruno Kahl and Jean-Philippe Gaudin here in Switzerland to ensure that these weapons of mass destruction, you know, as in the direct energy weapons, never reach the market. Right? But they failed, which is a pretty big failure. I hope this failure will get them executed for high treason, you know, but that's what we really need to consider. Okay, so very important, follow this whole story with Dennis Montgomery, focus on the big picture, you know, and don't be distracted by misunderstandings and, you know, spats about finer details. That is not really what matters. What matters is these parallel platforms that there is. And by the way, I think Dennis Montgomery received also a gag order from some court, right? So pretty big deal. They wouldn't really do that if he was just, you know, somebody. But it is not, doesn't take a stretch of the imagination to realize that these parallel platforms exist, okay? Platforms for mass surveillance, which really should be called mass human trafficking, okay? And mass human sex trafficking. That's what it is. You know, Love Int is not an aberration. It's one of the major business plans. So anyway, that's something I just had to say. Now, more news from the US. This is, okay, not hot off the press news, but it will be topical with FASB 56 in power. Okay, I point you to Catherine Austin Fitz's website. And this is about, it's called HUD Missing Money. .solari.com, and it's called The Real Game of Missing Money, an introduction. And I encourage you to read this introduction to get your head around, if you haven't really heard about this topic, about how trillions can be missing, you know, from the Treasury, right? And down here is a mention of the secret books which are envisioned by FASB Statement 56. So when I say FASB, it is FASAB Statement 56. And that's a sign of real trouble ahead. Okay, secret books expand the power of a secret group of people to transfer what they can while the getting is good. They also make it easier to use US special forces and covert operations or private mercenary armies to extend the life of the US reserve currency and enhance corporate profits and related campaign contributions. Secret books increase the risk of more aggressive and violent kicks of the can. Okay, I believe this will include re-engineering the US government and the US resources and domestic land use in a manner significantly outside domestic and international law. The human and environmental damage that is occurring from the secret US operations and suppression of critical intelligence is already profound. US life expectancy is falling. Inequality is rising. Now, what I would like to point out is that the main shortener of the US life expectancy are the genocide plans. Okay, it's not just, oh, people are getting poorer and that's why they eat poorer food at McDonald's and they die earlier. That's not what it is, guys. Okay, people are being murdered. So this is a very important passage here. So for those of you who don't know, FASB 56 allows basically the keeping of secret books where people don't have to justify what they did with your tax money or with the government money at all. Never, ever, ever again in the future. In other words, people can build up their private armies and go and murder all the other Americans and get their land. So when it's about a re-engineering of the US resources and domestic land, what it means concretely is that the gang stalkers will be paid out of these secret budgets. They will be paid absolutely millions, even though they are dumb as fuck little grunts, and they will murder you in your home and take possession of your land by changing the land registry. And should any of the people who know the fact that your family owns the land complain, they would be murdered by directed energy weapons too, or get a stroke. That's what it means, okay? So unless FASB 56 is repealed and everybody involved in its passing and its, submission is arrested for high treason, the US is going down in a frying pan, okay? So that's why you should really read up about this. And Katherine Austin Fitz is, I think, the world authority on the missing money. Okay, very important. So people in the US, get your head around this. And by the way, people not in the US, watch what the US people will do to plug this hole, because this money stolen from the US can also be used to kill you in Australia or in Europe. That's why it really matters that we all stick together. Okay, now, in other news from the US, I also point you to this article on James Fetz's website. And this was written by a contributor under the pen name Artane. Okay, what are the sources of madness? What is the agenda? This is very important. You have to read this article and get your head around it. Unless you understand what's in here, you will not be able to make sense of what is going to come down the pipe. Okay. So it has a lot of references here, which you should also look up. And by the way, the DHS Science and Technology partnerships down here is what this researcher suspects is behind the global human trafficking. Okay, because these are science and technology partnerships between countries. Okay, science and technology agreements, and there's one for every country. Every country where victims are being chipped and human trafficked and brain researched. Okay, so these science and technology agreements are what you should look up for your court case. Okay, so here are the different science and technology agreements for the UK, Germany, Sweden, and so on. Okay, very, very important article, and the link will be in the description below. So please read it, because this is the information that will save your life or give you a chance to save your life. Now, the other thing I want to point you towards is a presentation by this lady that is very important. This is the YouTube channel called Amazing Polly, and it's about Jeffrey Epstein's connection to mad scientists. Now, when you actually, listen to the presentation, the mad scientists were all involved in brain research. Okay, so I'm trying to, here's, for example, this image, maybe people know this, this is the connections in a brain mapped, but there are many, many people involved in this, and what sort of research Jeffrey Epstein was funding. Now, I can't probably click the right part of this presentation, but what this lady has dug up is, donations and funding from Jeffrey Epstein of about 30 million for this research here, 20 million for that research there. What I would like to add to this, okay, because this is excellent, an excellent presentation, excellent research. I just would like to remind people that they have to be aware that people like Jeffrey Epstein, with their billions, would be holding the billions of the Crown Corporation in trust. Okay, they are fronts. So when you're talking about Jeffrey Epstein doing this or that, what he does with these investments, right, is he is executing the plan of the Crown Corporation, of which he is an agent. Okay, his billions are not his. he can stick to his mansions and live in those mansions as long as, with the money that is earmarked for projects, he does exactly what he's told. Okay? That's what you should keep in mind. Because when you do a personality analysis of somebody who basically does sex trafficking of underage girls, it is inexplicable why this guy would be interested in high science. Of course, he isn't. He isn't that well read, but the people who are doing brain research on, for example, children would be using exactly somebody like him. And should he ever be discovered, like he is now with the work of these researchers, he would go down and the structure behind them, which is the Crown Corporation, would be left standing. Okay, so this is why it's so important that when you have connected Jeffrey Epstein's financials, you go back and you research Jeffrey Epstein's childhood and where he hailed from and what his parents did, and especially what his father did and what his grandfather did, and so on, because there will be links, I promise you, to the Crown Corporation through things like the secret societies, like the Masons and the secret services. And this is what's being discussed. Was Jeffrey Epstein an agent of an intelligence agency like MI6 or Mossad? Now, when I heard that, I frankly had to laugh out loud, because the answer is, of course he was. All right, of course he was. And why can I say that with such certainty, with having done exactly zero research about this topic? Well, it's because it's so simple when you just look at the systems analysis of it. We have secret societies, right, which are global. The Masons are global. We have secret services that are global. MI6 and the CIA are global, right? And it is the job of the secret societies to infiltrate the most powerful organization, being the secret services. But it's also the job of the secret services to infiltrate the most powerful secret society. So as you get infiltration, these two systems begin to merge and become one and the same thing. Okay, so the Masons are basically a front for global Vatican intel, like the Jesuits, and like MI6, and like Mossad. Now, if you're working in the cartel and you are a billionaire, you will have to be part of the Masons and the Vatican crime cartel one way or another. If you weren't and you're a billionaire, you're such a juicy fruit ripe for picking that the crime cartel would have asset stripped you and your family a long time ago. Okay, so if you're still a billionaire and you were a billionaire for the last couple of decades, say, or your family was, billionaires, and they have billions, it means that they are so deep in the crime cartel, right, that they would have to be part of a secret society or secret service, and the two are the same. Okay, so with the same question, you can say, oh, was Jeffrey Epstein connected to the intelligence agencies? And you can also ask, was he connected to the Jesuits or the Masons? The answer to both questions is yes, because he's a fucking billionaire. Okay, and it is for exactly this reason that Trump Tower has all this Masonic signaling. It would have to have Masonic signaling, because if Trump weren't a Mason, he wouldn't survive as a billionaire. Okay, so that's why Trump Towers is on the front, the 6x6x6 triangle of trees, right? That's why the building is, I think, 666 foot tall, and his penthouse is on the 66th floor after 13, like the 13 bloodlines, floors have been removed. Okay, this is what I heard. Not surprising, right? That's Masonic signaling. And there's also a sacrificial urn in his reception room, big sacrificial urn with a basin to hold, metaphorically, the blood of the people being sacrificed. Whoa, right? How does that fit together with Trump being supposedly one of the good guys? Well, he could be, if he figures out that it was necessary to be in the Masons and the Vatican crime cartel to stay a billionaire up to today, but it's absolutely mandatory to step the fuck out of the crime cartel, to number one, survive as a billionaire, but number two, survive the American people in this phased transition to a new system. Okay? And I know we have fast B-56, we have roving armies with directed energy weapons on the American streets, gunning absolutely everybody. And we have the US Space Command and the NATO Space Command gunning everybody at night with satellite weapons. How the hell can I be so certain that we're going to succeed? Well, there's a power transition model that says we're going to shut these people down, right? And this power transition model, as I said before, I think goes back to work done by John Nash, who was, you know, the biggest genius we had in the world. So if he says this is going to happen with 95% confidence, it's going to happen, right? So, but anyway, there's other ways to figure this out. But the crucial thing is that you have to be able to hold this dichotomy in your head that Trump can be a Mason and part of the Vatican crime cartel, and he can be doing good things, amongst others, to save his own skin, right? And actually, any billionaire out there should do exactly that, right? We are moving out of this now. If you want to survive with your companies intact, you better fall in line with the, you know, the direction of the phase transition. And I'm saying that not as a threat, I'm just saying it as a, you know, as a fact from the laws of physics of the system. Okay, so anyway, so much about this, but I encourage all the investigators out there to start thinking. I mean, first of all, excellent research, right? Great. But now move a step further and realize that all these investments are being done by proxy through the front of Jeffrey Epstein for the global crime cartel. And then you can match it up with other billionaires and what they were doing, and you can see the pattern much better. You can see it on a global scale, and you can see how one organism is executing one plan, really, you know, this is what's happening. So keep that in mind. Always think of these billionaires as fronts for the Crown Corporation, okay? So, but anyway, now on other news from the US. Actually, let me skip this one. Oh, no, let me not skip this one. Let me just go on to this, okay? So this is a pretty important broadcast. Let me just pick up some speed because I've got some stuff to go through. Now, still in the US, there is a video that somebody sent me saying that Trump is now controlling the chemtrails, okay? And this is the channel And We Know on the hashtag Serial Brain 2. Okay, now what I have to say about this little video, okay, is first of all, it starts off with such a whackload of cartel signaling, it took my breath away. Okay, that's one thing, right? So let's just watch this first couple of seconds.
That motto, Semper Fidelis, always faithful, burns in the soul of every Marine, a sacred promise the Corps has kept since the birth of our country. They are the elite masters of air and land and sea on battlefields all across the globe. They are the United States Marines.
Okay, I have to stop it here before I get, you know, done in for the footage. But now watch this carefully, okay? So this is the beginning. This video claims that Trump now controls the chemtrails. This is what we should prepare for. Okay, okay, right? So here's the speech by Trump, you know, given in pouring rain where nobody figured out to hold an umbrella over his head. But anyway, and then, you know, this is like, oh, this is such a typically American thing. It's nauseating, okay? So if you're in the US, you think that this is normal. If you're in Europe, this is the sickest fucking thing you could ever do, right? Which is like, oh yeah, the military are fucking killing psychopaths, yay! It is absolutely not acceptable in Europe for historical reasons to be swooning over the killing psychopaths that the country keeps, okay? Soldiers and these serial killing nutsos are best never seen and never heard of. That's how we keep it in Europe. Okay, so already that is nauseating for me. But then also look more carefully, right? So you have the approach of these, you know, flying killing machines, and people think, yay, this is super. It fucking isn't super, okay? Because they are being loaded with directed energy weapons. But then also listen carefully to what Trump says about these guys. They are the elites. They are the elites.
Burns in the soul of every Marine, a sacred promise the Corps has kept since the birth of our country. They are the elite masters of air and land and sea on battlefields all across the globe.
Okay, so they are the elite masters of air, land, and sea. Well, I find this frankly worrying, knowing that these people are recruited as dropout teenagers who just, you know, couldn't do anything else, and then they are being run by psychopathic serial killers. I really am not happy with these people being the masters of land, air, and sea. Absolutely fucking not. And then, if you think this is so great, look at this formation here. And remember that all of this is an age-old system that is just oozing cartel signaling. Look at the formation carefully. What do you see?
They are the United States Marines.
Did you see this? These guys, let's just see that again, will approach, okay, and I'll switch off the audio so that you can just focus on the actual video footage, right? They are approaching a satanic pentagram on the ground that they are all standing on, and then they turn outwards and point their guns outwards, with everybody doing like a low Heil Hitler here, right? This is a fucking Heil Hitler with a left arm. And then on the ground here is the satanic pentagram. You guys have no idea how fucked this is, okay? Now, if you need assistance to figure out how fucked this is and how fucked you are with this, remember that the founding fathers said that America shouldn't really have a standing army, okay? Having a standing army is pretty bad news when you're such a big country like the US, because you will have a big, fat killing machine. And in peace times, these jerks get so bored, they will start killing you because you're the closest thing at hand. Okay? And funnily enough, that's exactly what's happening. Okay? So me seeing these bunch of guys cluster around a satanic pentagram, turn outwards towards the American people around them, point a gun at them, and do a Heil Hitler is really not good news. Okay, fine. But then you're watching this, right? And I bet you this is all totally lost on all the Americans, right? And why is it lost on the Americans? Because the American culture is only 200 years old, and they still haven't figured out that everything that they have, including their cartel signaling, actually comes from Europe, and actually goes back to the pharaohs. So it goes back to Africa, right? But these guys think they are the top of the world, and actually they are just slaves of the Crown Corporation. But stuff like this shows it, guys. So if you have eyes to see and a brain to process, it's right here in your face. These people do not work for America. They are pointing the guns at Americans, and they are defending the satanic pentagram. That's what's being shown here. And that's how it is. But then, as the music picks up, look carefully what is shown. And this is where the crescendo launches. And we see a sword that, first of all, looks like an obelisk. And if you think, well, swords do look like an obelisk a bit, right? But then if that was lost on you and you don't think of the Vatican crime cartel when you see the obelisk, which by the way is held at an angle that it really looks like an erect dick, which is really what the obelisk stands for, should that be lost on you, there's also the sun symbol right here behind the obelisk, the sun. All right. right? This is meant to be a reflection, but really it's the sun, right? So what you have here, the sword typically symbolizes the right to kill for the cartel, right? For the Masons or the Jesuits here, aka Vatican Intel, right? Now, is that coincidence that this video stream is showing that? Blimey, it would be pretty big coincidence, okay? So, and this is when it dramatically starts up, and then you see chemtrails, okay? Now, chemtrails. With this introduction, will I take this on trust, what these people are telling me? Fuck no. I'm sorry. I mean, what you're showing me, if this is genuinely just a mistake, by cutting this video this way, you are showing me that you haven't figured out the most fundamental basics about the Vatican crime cartel. If you can't tell your head from your ass regarding this, how reliable is your assessment of who's controlling chemtrails? All right? The basics, people. Let's get the basics right first. All right? So the first 40 seconds of this already screwed up the entire video for me. But then there's some useful information in here because they're also showing a German, this guy here is a German engineer who's talking about, he's an airplane engineer, and he's talking about how he actually put in the spraying devices for the chemtrails into airplanes. So he was tasked to refurbish airplanes, and he said that they had to wear hazmat, so complete, these hazmat suits, these chemical, protection suits, because the stuff that would go into those spraying devices was so highly toxic. Okay, so that is good information. But then, frankly, with that in mind, okay, I don't care who is controlling the chemtrails. As long as we have chemtrails, we have a genocide. Okay, that's how you have to think. So it doesn't freaking matter who is controlling it. What really matters is that this genocide is switched off, that the chemtrails are switched off immediately by yesterday. So tomorrow morning, I can just go out, and Switzerland is one of those areas that is heavily chemtrailed. And to my dear Swiss, I would like to say that that is another big fat evidence over your heads every day that the crime cartel plans to genocide you. You are not at the center of the crime cartel, as you have been for the last 800 plus years, because the crime cartel is moving to China. It's moving to Far East Asia. So you, dear Swiss, will end up bottom of the pile. Why the bottom? Well, because you were so close to the top. Unless you're really bashed down, you can have a comeback, right? Which you will not allow to have. So if there's any chemtrails left tomorrow over Switzerland, right, I know that Trump isn't controlling shit. Okay. And why has Trump a connection to Switzerland? Well, it's because, it's the US Air Force. You see that he's the chief of, what's it called? The chief commander of the US, armed forces. So if he would really control that, he would control the entire spraying and have it shut off tomorrow over the US. And then, because the US Air Force is controlling NATO, they could switch off all the spraying by tomorrow. So, and, if they're still spraying over the US and over Europe tomorrow, you know that this is all bollocks. And then suddenly all the cartel signaling at the beginning of the video will make sense. It's just another Masonic crime cartel fraud, and Trump isn't controlling shit still, So please do learn the cartel signaling, and then you will not have that many surprises in real life. Okay, now this is from the US. Oh, yes. Now look at this. Sorry, I will move to other countries, which I have to because there's so much to go through. But one more news from the US. This is something that I thought was super quaint. This is CBS News, which, talking about cartel signaling, has a big fat all-seeing eye in their logo. So this is how much I'm gonna, pay attention to what these guys are saying, with the big whacking all-seeing eye staring at me, right? So forget it. But look at this. The headline reads, this is from the 2nd of June, actually 2015, so this is not news. But it said, people fearing space weapons target one California town. So look at the headline and look at neurolinguistic programming here, aka deception, aka bullshitting. Okay, here it says that the people are targeting a California town. It doesn't say that space weapons are targeting people. No, it's the people targeting one California town that put forth a legal bill to have these weapons banned. Okay, and this is by a US representative, Dennis, and I can never pronounce his name. Is it, I will not even try. It's written here, okay? However you pronounce his name. So he had a bill which was introduced in 2011, okay? And now, oh, sorry. So there was a Richmond resolution in support of a bill which is from 2001. But now look at the timescales, okay? So the original bill by this US representative was in 2001, and then 15 fucking years later, now one councilwoman is introducing a Richmond resolution, right? And it says it is imperative that Richmond adopt this resolution in effort to stand in solidarity with residents who claim to be undersold from space-based weapons that should be outlawed by the Space Preservation Act. Okay, now I would like to say to this lady that she too has her head a bit up her ass, because first of all, it is not to stand in solidarity with those residents, right? And first of all, it's not those residents claiming to be undersold from space-based weapons. Those residents are undersold from space-based weapons. And once you have recognized that, you're not just standing in solidarity with them, you are actually trying to save your own ass, my dear. Okay? Because whatever attacks them, right, will be used on you. And by the time it's going to be used on you, it will be instant death. It will not be the year-long human experimentation that's currently being done on those residents. So in other words, if you have space-based weapons gunning people in your community, it means that the laser directed energy weapon shots are basically, you know, a few hundred meters from your house. That's what it fucking means, child. Right? Do you want to have fucking laser weapons from space zapping people a few hundred meters from your house? Right? That's the thing that you should be saying, right? It is, oh shit, there's a crime cartel murdering my neighbors with a beam that only takes a software setting to change for it to aim at my house and kill me and my children and my husband and my favorite guinea pig. That's what this is about, okay? Oh man, it really upsets me how people can be so fucking thick, really. I mean, it's like they get it, but at the same time, they still don't get it. Like, how the fuck can this be? Okay, but anyway, that's politicians for you. Okay, now, this is, I think, the last thing from the US. There is a new petition about stop organized gang stalking, targeted individual lives matter. Now, you might ask, what is the point of having yet another petition? But there is a point. Just sign it. It's for free. And then we can all quote these in our court cases that all these petitions have been submitted. That's what this is about. And also petitions are a great way to keep prodding your representatives. And this particular petition is going to President Donald Trump and 4 others. Okay. So the link to that will be in the description. This is something that you can do today. Now, let's change to the United Kingdom. Apparently, bulk hacking by UK spy agencies is illegal, a High Court was told. This is, again, from June 2019. Okay, so just a few weeks ago. Now, I haven't really checked if there's any judgment since then. Probably not. But it is, again, Look at the headline. I mean, this is The Guardian, okay? The Guardian of the cartel. This is MI7 writing here, okay? So don't expect like big revelations. But still, bulk hacking by UK spy agencies. Look at the wording. This isn't bulk hacking. This is mass human trafficking. Okay? And of course, mass human trafficking is illegal. You don't have to tell the fucking court that. It should know because it's the law. All right? So watch out for these things, right? And by the way, talking about wording, I also would suggest that we stop calling it organized gang stalking. You know what this is? This is actually serial killer stalking. That's what it is. The goal is when you have a serial killer stalk a victim, he's getting off on it. And he's kind of, you know, jerking one off inside and building himself up to the kill. And that's exactly what this gang stalking is about. It is getting your average doofus to get addicted to stalking, to build up an unfounded internal hatred and work through the mental processes of justifying your targeting, so that by the time he's asked to kill you, the justification will be in place in his mind. That's what it is. It is not organized gang stalking, it is serial killer stalking, right? And the reasons why the intelligence agencies around the world use serial killer stalking as one of their terror methods, you know why that is? It is because they're all serial killers at the top. It comes natural to them. Okay? So much about language. But anyway, watch this court case, okay? And this is about rights groups arguing that powers of MI5 and GCHQ to obtain and store data breaches human rights. Yeah, but how much clearer would it be in a judge's head when you're saying that the only reason to get this data is to human traffic people? And the evidence of human trafficking is all around us in the targeting cases, right? If you phrase it like this, a judge can and ah and go like, yeah, but maybe it's used to fight terrorism. No fucking isn't, because there was never any terrorism. It was only ever MI5 pulling off bullshit, like 7/7, right? So when you put it like that, it is already neurolinguistic programming of a judge to open the doorway to bless this. And this is super dangerous. Now, I'm not surprised that the human rights groups would be engaged in this sort of bullshit, because they have been ignoring victims for the last 3 decades. So I think these human rights groups are controlled by Intel, and this is Intel's ass covering exercise to try to find a judge stupid enough who still hasn't received the news that what MI5 and GCHQ are publicly doing is public human trafficking, public Nazi-style experimentation, public torture, public mutilation, and public executions. Something that the UK has abolished, I think, back in the 70s or something like that. Right? This is what it's about. It's not about this, you know, fanning around with bulk hacking or mass surveillance. No, it is mass human trafficking for mass murder. That's what we're talking about. So if you have a chance to comment on these pages and comment to your, you know, elected officials and send a letter to your local judiciary, then please do, and get it into the heads of these judges, even the county court judges all across the country, that this is what we're dealing with. It is not mass surveillance. It is not bulk hacking. It is mass human trafficking for mass murder. Okay? Fine. Now, what you should also do, last thing from the UK, is there's this wonderful, wonderful book that I discovered. It's free, available free online, and it's called Dope Inc. Britain's Opium War Against the US, by a US Labour Party investigative team, and directed by a bunch of people, okay? Now, if you go to this link on archive.org, which will be in the description later, on the left, you will find here the PDF for download, okay? And there, just download this. This is Dope Inc. This is the book, okay? Very important, very, very important. And this is from 1978, okay? But it holds the key, okay? It holds the key because it actually explains to you how, you know, this concept of the drug trade being controlled by the government, or rather by the crown, as it shows it here, you know, was already well known back then. I mean, this is when it was investigated, okay? So the CIA being in charge of importing drugs to the United States is not a surprise, because the CIA is the crown corporation in America. Okay, it's the crown in America. So of course it's the same business plan. So if you want to understand where all this comes from, please read this. And there are some amazing nuggets in this book, okay? So I really recommend that people, you know, download this as long as this book is still available and hasn't been digitally burned in the digital, you know, book burning. And ideally print it off, because it's something that you should have, and you should really bit by bit read it and absorb it. Very, very important book. And I'm grateful to the person who pointed this out to me, because I would have never heard. Now, let's change to Russia, okay? Let's change to Russia. Funny news, you know how I was doing the press release and the tsunami email campaign 2.0, and how I was informing, you know, parliaments and governments around the world about these new affidavits that were coming out that prove a global targeting program. Well, I also was trying to inform the Kremlin, and the Kremlin has something which is called the corruption report page. And I thought, yeah, let's go to the Kremlin and report corruption, right? I mean, why not? And so I went to this page, and as I said, Google Chrome has this wonderful translate option where you hit it, and suddenly you can read it all in English, okay? So in here, there's a form, but there's one snag, which is if you start filling in the form, it will eventually ask you to not use Latin letters. It wants to have, you know, the Russian letters here. And I was like, oh shit, how am I going to do that? So what I did is I went field by field and I put it into Google Translate, okay? So I put my name in with Russian words, or Russian letters rather, and then the subject, and then, you know, so on, and my message. But what is hilarious, okay, is after I translated my name and my message into, you know, Russian spelling and also into Russian using Google Translate, when I pressed send, or rather you press, you know, preview, and you get a final chance to look at your message, and thank goodness for that, because I discovered that they translated it back into English. Okay, so they did a reverse translation, and it was hilarious. So Horton Katharina came out okay. My email came out okay, but then look at the text that, you know, I would have submitted. It's hilarious because it sounds almost like I'm declaring nuclear war here. Okay, it says, I mean, you know what the original text sounds like. It's under the media and press link on my website. And it just said things like, I'm writing to inform you that there's new, you know, court actionable affidavits proving this, you know, targeting program. And then it was translated to, Dear Mr. President, I am writing a letter from the Court of Justice against other nations. Like, what? After the launch of the Global Energy Control Program, it was time for people to use it. Great detail. The affidavits can be found here, okay? The analysis results from those of the military. It is your responsibility. Holocaust. Us victims need your help. Yours sincerely, Dr. US-Europe Joint Investigation, blah, blah, right? I mean, this is hilarious. This is nothing like what I've written, and I cannot believe that this actually comes from a translation. I think what this actually is the KGB having a laugh, and I thought it was hilarious. So I'm pretty sure the KGB knew what I, you know, copied and pasted into the form as soon as I copied and pasted it into the form, right? So they didn't need this translation. But I thought this was amusing, how it said, I'm writing a letter from the Court of Justice against other nations. You know, I mean, this is, and also the Global Energy Control Program. It was time for people to use it. Great detail. What? So anyway, this is probably a message from the KGB back to the world. So here it is, you know, absolutely hilarious. But anyway, so the Russians have great humor. Now, talking about the Russians having great humor, I remind you that a while back, I made this video about the secrets of the double-headed chicken, okay? And I made this video back from, here it is, hang on, this is the bit I wanted to show you. I made this video from Croatia. So if you want to look it up, Secrets of the Double-Headed Chicken. And if you go to the 1 hour 30-minute mark, so after an hour and a half, I was talking about cartel signaling and connecting the symbolism of what was here on the wall, right? The mural above Putin's head to the Knights of Malta. Okay, and I was talking about Oliver Stone as well, and I was analyzing, you know, the fact that we've got Roman standards here, and you know, a prominent reflection and what that means. Okay, but what is absolutely hilarious is that I was talking about cartel signaling above the head of Putin. Okay, and how this relates to the Vatican crime cartel, because the Knights of Malta, which have exactly this logo of the, okay, I say double-headed chicken. Of course, this is some double-headed eagle or phoenix or whatever the hell that's meant to be, but it has 3 crowns. So 2 crowns on the head of each, you know, each head, and then a 3rd crown at the top. This is exactly the logo of the Knights of Malta. Okay. So, which, by the way, are headquartered in Rome and are controlled by the Vatican. Okay, so anyway, I made this point and I pointed to murals above Putin's head. So imagine my surprise, right, when shortly thereafter, so this was published on the 11th of May 2019, and then suddenly Google sends me this video here, right, which was published on the 7th of June 2019, and the video is breaking. Putin warns the West. His words again fall on deaf ears. Okay, so this is the video, and what is hilarious in this is that in this video, I'll just show you. It starts somewhere. I think it's somewhere here. Okay. So this is, I hope you can see the subtitles, right? So the question to Putin is, and ideally you just read the subtitles. Okay, I'll just show you this scene. Okay. So the question is, where's our civilization going? Do you see light at the end of the tunnel? Okay. So what can countries that are the main players in the political process do about it? This is a generalized question, Mr. Putin, Mr. President. And now listen to what Putin says and just look at the grin on his face, okay?
Политического процесса. Вот такой обобщенный вопрос, понимаете. Если мы посмотрим на стены, на фрески, вот здесь.
So look at this. He says, if you look around at the murals, at the frescoes, look up. There is war everywhere. Unfortunately, this has been the case for ages. And at this moment, all the journalists turn their heads and they start looking at the mural above them. And it's the camera switches, and then look what is shown.
Наверх. И здесь то же самое. Кругом война. К сожалению,
Putin is laughing. Okay, and then the camera switches, and what you can see is Roman soldiers, and one soldier has a big fat snake on his shield. The Vatican crime cartel, right? Big fat snake. So, in other words, what is shown here is that if you go back, right, he says, if you look at the murals, at the frescoes, there's war everywhere. Unfortunately, this has been the case for ages. So in other words, he's saying, look, there's this war, and if you look at, look at how he's laughing, okay? This is, I can't tell you how special this is to see a Russian laughing, okay? But he is really amused. He's really rolling around laughing inside. And then they show this shield. Okay, so in other words, the message is, yeah, there's this war everywhere, and it's the same war. We are also fighting against the Vatican crime cartel over here in Russia. And that's exactly what I said in my video, right? When I was going on about the secrets of the double-headed chicken. So, I mean, the thing you have to know about Russians, so I used to work with quite a lot of Russians in particle physics. Okay, so I had my my Russian colleagues both at DAISY and at CERN, and what is also and also I worked at other institutes as a visiting scientist and so on. But what's always very telling is that the Russians were always dead serious. So you never had them, laugh out loud or anything like that, right? So I had one colleague who was, taking this to extremes, and he was just a poker face, his usual slightly melancholic Russian poker face. And the only way I could tell, I mean, he would say something super sarcastic, and I would look at him. He would have this twinkle in his eyes, and that was the sign that he's rolling around laughing inside, But I used to joke about this and say, well, this is an artifact of the communist system, and smiling was rationed back in the communist days, and this was just kept on, and the Russians just don't smile if they don't have to, only for special occasions like birthdays. But anyway, so for me to see a Russian who is really just sitting there smirking and about to crack up is absolutely extraordinary. But also, another thing, I mean, just look at this again, okay? So Putin does actually smile quite a lot, but just look at the facial expression, okay?
Если мы посмотрим на стены, на фрески, вот здесь наверх, и здесь тоже.
And also, if you look carefully, you have to, so he's sitting here, and as he's saying that, he's striking over his mouth several times. So it's almost like he's trying to strike, the smirk off his lips. Just watch how he's.
Если мы посмотрим на стены, на фрески.
There it is. Twice, right?
Кругом война.
And now he's about to crack up. Look at this, okay?
Так было всегда. История человечества полна истории конфликтов. Правда, за всеми конфликтами всегда наступал мир. И лучше бы до конфликтов не доводить.
Okay, so he's saying how it would be better to avoid conflicts altogether. And human history is full of stories of conflicts. It's true that all conflicts were followed by periods of peace, right? But it would be better to avoid conflicts altogether, right? And then he's back to serious. And one of the things that really amused me, I mean, apart from the fact that I know that it's very rare to see a Russian like that, I mean, you can see it here in his eyes, I mean, what I suddenly thought about is that I remembered that the second half of this video where I'm talking about the double-headed chicken, right? I'm also wondering if he's thinking about the double-headed chicken right now. But the second bit, I was talking about James Comey and this entire revelations or these leaks about this videotape with James Comey, well, unfortunately raping, children, but also raping Prince Charles and the entire Howdy Doody theme. And it occurred to me as, what if, as he's talking in his ear chip, his colleagues are like, hey, Vladimir, howdy doody. Absolutely hilarious, right? I mean, you can see him. He's struggling to hold it in. But anyway, so this was a very nice clip because it shows right there up on the wall, right, that they have exactly the same thing going on over there as we have over here. And this is what I said all along, is that it's a big fat lie that the US and Europe are separate from Russia. I can tell you it's the same in China as well, though they use different symbolism there. Right, but it is all the same system. And when you read this book, Dope Inc., okay, that I've recommended earlier, you will also hear about the Opium War, which was with China. Okay, so this is what is connecting us everywhere around the world. And this is why I'm saying we all have to stick together. All these talk about, oh, it's us against the Chinese and us against the Russians. No, it is the Russian and the Chinese and the European and American and Latin American and African people, and of course Australians, right, against the crime cartel. That's what it is. The big difference is not, are you Russian or are you American? The big difference is, are you inside the crime cartel or outside the crime cartel? You can be inside the crime cartel if you're an American, or if you're Russian, or if you're Chinese or European, right? And you can be outside if you're any of those. And that is the real difference, okay? If you are outside of the crime cartel, you want the rule of law, because that, and if you remember, I showed you last time, the rule of law is basically turning the world engine, the world system we have, as close to the Carnot cycle as we can possibly get. It is the most efficient thing because nobody is being dealt with unfairly. Nobody has an unfair advantage. As soon as you have people with an unfair advantage, it will lead to inefficiencies. Okay? So that is it. It is not just, oh, you know, I don't know what, a weed smoking hippie and I'm all just about love and peace and everything. No, 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 no. I'm a physicist and I'm a systems analyst. And I'll tell you all, guys, that the Carnot cycle is the most efficient thing, and therefore it is the most profitable thing for everybody. It is the way to derive the most profit from what we have on planet Earth, from its people, from its natural resources, right? And from each other. And this has been known for thousands of years, which is why for thousands of years, people were striving for peace, right? But for thousands of years, we had fucking psychopaths with us. And typically it is an army starting a war. I mean, we still have to witness the day where, you know, the Association of Dentists or the Association of Accountants starts a war, right? And that's not surprising because the the military, right? Anywhere in the world, the military is collecting psychopaths, and they are the problem. Criminals and psychopaths, people who like to murder just for the sake of it. Now, the fact that that doesn't produce, you know, economic prosperity is pretty fucking obvious, right? It just produces a lot of dead bodies, dead and mutilated people. That's all. So this is why I'm saying all this worship of the military in the US, it's first of all nauseating for somebody from Europe, but it's also absolutely harebrained. It's not understanding that if you put your military above everything and you call them master of the land and the sea and the air, you have a big fat problem. And it actually will kill you first before it kills anybody else, you know, in really large numbers. And that's what we will face now. So having a standing army is a really bad thing because you have a big collective of highly trained psychopathic serial killers knocking around, and you give them all the most advanced weapons and you say, you just, you know, stay there in the barracks and do whatever psychopathic serial killers do, right? I mean, how is that gonna lead to a good outcome? Right? So if anything, globally, we need to rein in the fucking psychopaths and these criminals and have them shut the fuck down. And if anything, we don't need to give them bigger and better weapons. We have to take the weapons away and destroy the weapons. Fortunately, there's a way to do that because the Lockheed Martin software and other software parallel platforms are tracking the, you know, the location and the number of every single weapon that has ever been sold, you know? So remember that these data sets exist should you ever want to confiscate all the directed energy weapons given to gang stalkers, which are murdering Americans on the street and in Europe today, right now, right? So the intelligence agencies know where every single weapon is. Okay, but that aside. So now this was Russia. Okay, so now let me jump forward. This is now, let me go to Africa, to Egypt. Okay, that's another piece of news. And this is also very important. Now in Egypt, the news item from 17th of June 2019 is that Egypt's ousted president, Mohamed Morsi, dies during trial. So that obviously cannot be, because just like having a stroke when you are handing over, you know, data to the FBI, whistleblowing data to the FBI, having a stroke right then is just as unlikely as dying during trial. So this guy was murdered, okay? And it gets back to the same thing. If you're wondering how this guy was murdered, keep in mind it could have been directed energy weapons, right? State TV said the cause of death was a heart attack. Well, this you can do with a heart attack gun. You can do it with, you know, bio warfare, but it's much quicker to just shoot him in the heart with a directed energy weapon. Okay, and remember that he can be shot in the heart from a weapon that is outside the room and is shooting through the ceiling or through the wall. Okay. So, okay, and now it says, oh, activists and his family have long said that Morsi was not receiving treatment for serious health problems such as high blood pressure and diabetes, and was constantly being held in solitary confinement. Now, by the way, this does not say that his activists and his family said that, oh, he probably died because of high blood pressure and diabetes and these health problems. No, this is again the BBC, aka MI7, saying, putting that in as a little bit of brain programming, right? But it doesn't matter how you know, hard hit your health is, still dying during trial, which is just a couple of hours, is so unlikely that I can guarantee that this guy was murdered. Okay. So the Muslim Brotherhood said the death was a full-fledged murder, and I have to agree with the Muslim Brotherhood on this statement completely, you know. And again, it doesn't matter what you think about the Muslim Brotherhood, a murder is a murder, okay? And remember, if you let one type of people get away with murder over others, maybe because you sympathize with them over the Muslim Brotherhood, well, again, we are back to the same old thing, that you are moving away from the Carnot cycle. The Carnot cycle of the global system is really the rule of law, whereby murder is, you know, a crime that has to be punished. If you let a certain group of people get away with murder, again, we're back to the last presentation, you're moving away from this Carnot cycle, right? You are introducing an inefficiency that will get bigger and bigger because that group will profit ever more from this murder, and it will run out of hand. It will become a standing business plan. Okay, so this is why. Now let's change to Australia. Okay, Australia had some big news that I have to mention, and this was sent to me by somebody, so I didn't actually hear about this, and I'm very grateful to the Australian who sent this to me and educated me about this, because this is indeed important. Now, this article I can only show you bits of because it's a paid platform. It says, spying shock, shades of Big Brother as cybersecurity vision comes to light. Okay, now this is the original article by Annika Smethurst for the Sunday Telegraph, published 28th of April 2018. Unfortunately, I can't read the article because I have to pay. But anyway, two powerful government agencies are discussing radical new espionage powers that would see Australia's cyber spy agency monitor Australian citizens for the first time. Okay, Annika, first of all, they are not monitoring Australian citizens for the first time. If you had paid attention to Bill Binney, you would know that the NSA has been monitoring everybody for a very long time, pretty much since the beginnings of the internet. They are collecting everything and storing everything, content and all. So Australian citizens have been monitored by the NSA since the very beginning of this, you know, monitoring opportunity. Now, because Australia is part of the Five Eyes, they can access the NSA database. So this is an old hat. Okay? So what is now new is that it's not really radical. It is the Australian intelligence doing an arse covering exercise. They want to legalize, kind of posthumously, you know, they want to legalize their criminality. And they want to be able to do it out in the open, as much as the NATO Space Command and the US Space Command and MI5 wants to have the right to murder people with directed energy weapons out in the open, like they're murdering me and MI6. Okay, so what it actually is, this is not new. The actual substance of this article is an old hat. The only thing that's new is that these people basically show us that they want to have the full right in daylight, in broad daylight. Okay? And that is what is so shocking. Okay, so now it says, under the plans, emails, bank records, and text messages of Australians could be secretly accessed by digital spies without its trace, provided the Defence and Home Affairs ministers approved. Bullshit! Emails, bank records, and text messages of Australians could already be secretly accessed by digital spies without a trace 20 years ago, and it didn't pissing matter if the Defence and Home Affairs ministers approved. Okay? And then it says, the power grab is detailed in top secret letters between the heads of the Department of Home Affairs and Defence, seen by the Sunday Telegraph, which outlined proposed new powers for Australia's spy agency. And then the article trails off here, okay? But already from these 2 sentences or 3 sentences, I can tell that this Annika Smethurst has been set up. She is being led up the garden path. And then guess what? This came out on the 28th of April 2018, and lo and behold, that's exactly what happened, because then Zero Hedge reported that the Australian feds raid News Corp journalists' home after government spying expose. It says Australian federal police officers are raiding the home of News Corp Australia journalist Annika Smethurst over an April 2018 story accusing the government of radical new espionage powers, allowing the Australian Signals Directorate, ASD, to monitor citizens for the first time. What fucking bollocks, according to the Daily Telegraph. I mean, fuck off. Okay, unless you have your head so deeply embedded in your ass and had it for the last, 18 years, that you never heard William Binney, former technical director of NSA, tell us in great detail that the NSA hoovers up everything and that shares it with the Five Eyes, plus another 9 or 15, rogue governments around the world, Well, I mean, this is nonsense, okay? So this was so well known. Why is this happening? And I can tell you why this is happening, because the whole thing is a big fat fucking setup. Okay? They wanted to get rid of her because she might be one of the journalists reporting about what's coming down the pipe, which is basically Neurogate and Genocide Gate. And they wanted to have a reason to take her out. And then they put up this, frankly, limp-wristed Nancy boy fannying around, pretending like what she wrote about was, oh my God, so out there that we need to raid her home. Bullshit. Okay? But now, what do we do with this? What we do with this is we say, oh, it was the Australian Federal Police officers. Well, who runs the Australian Federal Police, my dear Australians? You need to get that bastard into court. And you can help this woman by basically charging these people with high fucking treason. Okay? Because they're clearly executing a criminal plan, okay, of terrorizing a journalist on not even news, right? I mean, she was kind enough to put out an article about something that was an old hat 16 years ago. And then these Masonic motherfuckers, because that's what they are, took that as a fucking, dumbest shit excuse to raid her home, to terrorize her. Okay, this whole thing is a big fat distraction. Okay, And I remind you that Australian police has the same Masonic tiling in their uniform as the Chicago police does and as the Metropolitan Police does in London. That's what this is about. This is a big fat Masonic cock-yanking show. That's what it is. Okay? In my view. I mean, this is not new. Okay? Monitor citizens for the first time. I mean, fuck off. Really? What nonsense. But anyway, so here's another report by the Guardian of the Cartel. Federal police raid home of News Corps journalist Annika Smethurst. Okay, AFP officers execute a search warrant over 2018 report about new powers for intelligence agencies to spy on Australians. And can you see how the Guardian of the Cartel is again doing neurolinguistic programming by already telling you that this is what they did? No, it wasn't a search warrant over this 2018 report. These Masonic crime cartel members did a raid to terrorize a journalist over absolutely piss all. That's what the article should read like as the first opening title. And then the article should go into the precise analysis of why Masonic agents would do such a thing. And that's when it would be a proper news article. This isn't a news article. This is a brainwash script by the Guardian of the Cartel. Okay? So be aware. And be aware that Luke Harding works for the Guardian. Luke Harding is, in my view, an MI7 agent. He gaslighted me, and he was also trying to get Julian Assange into the shit by tying him to some sort of freaky Russian connection, right? That was just utter piffling nonsense. The same Guardian journalist, okay? Now, this article is written by a guy called Paul Karp, but Paul Karp, I'm sorry, you're not a journalist. You're just a cartel, you know, drivel writer here. Okay, so it says here, this is interesting. On Tuesday, police executed a warrant investigating the alleged publishing of information. I mean, alleged publishing. By the time it's published, it's not fucking alleged publishing. It was probably in the newspaper. Okay, so anyway. Of information classified as an official secret. I mean, is this an official? How the fuck can this be an official secret? How the fuck can this be an official secret when already years and years ago we had William Binney explain in great detail as the former technical director of the NSA how the spying on Australians works, you know? I mean, this isn't an official secret. This isn't even a secret. So this is bollocks, okay? Which they said had the potential to undermine Australia's national security. No, fucking doesn't. What's undermining Australia's national security is mass human trafficking by the Australian Secret Service, which is a transnational criminal organization as part of the Five Eyes. That's what's undermining national security. But anyway, let's read on. The warrant from an ACT magistrate gave police authority to search the home computer and mobile phone of the News Corp Sunday title's political editor. Now, I suspect that she might have been investigating something else, and that is maybe why they wanted to presumably trash her home, her computer, and her mobile phone, which they probably confiscated and will not give out. The raid prompted outrage from News Corp Australia, which labeled it a dangerous act of intimidation targeted at public interest reporting. Oh, absolutely. In April 2018, Smethurst reported that the heads of the Defence and Home Affairs ministries had discussed draconian new powers to allow the Australian Signals Directorate to spy on Australian citizens for the first time. No, this isn't the problem, because this was the freaking obvious. There's something else buried in this, okay? There's something else, and there's something about the heads of defence, which presumably because they're running a genocide would be deeply involved in genocide, and Home Affairs because the genocide is running at home would, I presume, also be deeply involved in genocide and in this crime cartel. So if I had to guess, this journalist might have been investigating something else, and this is what it was about. Maybe after she reported about the mass surveillance, she got her head around neurological targeting as well. Who knows? I mean, look at this. Under the mooted plan, spies would be allowed to secretly access emails, bank accounts, and text messages with approval from the Defense and Home. I mean, that would be novel. Frankly, that is staggeringly novel. If they could only do that, if these, you know, two ministers agree, that would be really novel. Okay, so under current laws, the Australian Federal Police and domestic spy agency ASIO, yeah, with emphasis on AS, have the power to investigate Australians with a warrant and seek technical advice from ASD, which is not permitted to produce intelligence on Australians. Oh, fuck off. Really. I mean, pro forma, okay, which is why NSA is producing the intelligence on Australians and then gives it to ASD. Oh, man.